The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports from my portfolio companies. Mom's voice had that particular tone, the one she reserved for delivering news she knew would sting but felt I deserved to hear. "Rachel, I need to tell you something about Thanksgiving," she began. "Your brother Derek is bringing some very important people this year. Venture capital partners from his firm. These are the kind of connections that matter in business." I leaned back in my chair, watching the morning sun illuminate the Chicago skyline through my office windows. "Okay, Mom. So we've decided it would be best if you skip this year. Nothing personal, sweetheart, but Derek needs to make the right impression. Having his sister there, well, you understand. You work in that little nonprofit sector. These people operate at a different level." "I understand," I said quietly. "I knew you'd be reasonable about it. Derek's worked so hard to get where he is. Did I mention his firm just closed a $240 million fund? Can you imagine? My son managing that kind of money. We're so proud." "That's impressive. Anyway, we'll do something with you another time. Maybe lunch in January?" "I have to go. I'm meeting Derek to plan the menu. These investors are used to the finest things." The line went dead. I sat there for a moment, then returned to the document on my screen. A merger proposal that would consolidate 3 of my healthcare technology companies into a single entity valued at $380 million. My executive assistant James knocked and entered. "Your 10 o'clock is here," he said. "The venture capital group from Morrison and Partners." I glanced at my calendar. Right. The portfolio review meeting. "They seem eager," James added. "Apparently they're looking to expand their healthcare tech investments significantly. Word is they've got $240 million in their new fund." Something clicked. Morrison and Partners? That's Derek's firm. James paused. "Your brother Derek?" "The same." I straightened my blazer. "Well, this should be interesting. Give me 2 minutes, then show them in." I walked to my office window, looking out at the city where I'd built my empire in silence. For 12 years, my family had dismissed my career as charity work, because I'd started in the nonprofit sector. What they didn't know, what I'd never corrected, was that I'd transitioned into private equity 8 years ago. They'd never asked. They just assumed. Derek had always been the golden child. Stanford MBA, recruited by a top firm, always in the right suit, always at the right restaurants. I'd gone to state school, started at a nonprofit healthcare advocacy organization, lived modestly. In my family's eyes, I was the disappointing daughter who'd chosen purpose over profit. They had no idea I'd turned that nonprofit experience into expertise that made me one of the most sought-after healthcare technology investors in the Midwest. They'd never noticed when I stopped working for the nonprofit and started acquiring companies. They'd never asked about the promotion that became a VP position at a private equity firm, or about the 5 years after that when I'd built my own fund. I was 34 years old and managed a portfolio worth $2.7 billion across 17 companies. My fund, Sterling Healthcare Ventures, had a reputation for turning struggling healthcare tech companies into industry leaders. I sat on 12 boards. Forbes had profiled me 6 months ago as one of the power players reshaping healthcare investment. But to my family, I was still Rachel who works with sick people, or Rachel in her charity phase. The worst part wasn't the dismissal. It was how Derek had weaponized their perception. At family gatherings, he'd introduce himself with his job title and firm name, then introduce me as my sister who does nonprofit stuff. When relatives asked about my work, he'd change the subject. When I bought my Lincoln Park brownstone 3 years ago, Derek told everyone I must have gotten some kind of subsidy for nonprofit workers. Last Christmas, Derek had brought his girlfriend, now fiancée, Melissa, who worked in marketing. At dinner, Melissa asked what I did. Before I could answer, Derek jumped in. "Rachel works with healthcare charities. Very noble but not exactly lucrative. Not like the work we do in venture capital." Dad had laughed. "That's why Derek drives a Tesla and Rachel takes the train." I'd said nothing even though my Model S was parked in my private garage and I took the train because I used the commute time to work. Even though the watch on my wrist cost more than Derek's entire wardrobe. Even though the charity work they mocked had made me wealthier than everyone at that table combined. I didn't correct them because I'd learned something valuable. Being underestimated was a competitive advantage. While Derek spent energy proving himself, I spent energy building. While he networked at the right parties, I closed deals. While he posted about his wins on LinkedIn, I quietly acquired his competitors. There was another reason I'd stayed silent. I wanted to see how far they'd go. How much they'd reveal about who they really were when they thought I had nothing. Every dismissive comment, every piece of unsolicited advice about getting serious about my career, every family event I wasn't invited to because I'd bring down the professional tone, I cataloged it all. Not for revenge. For clarity. And now Derek's colleagues, the investors he was so proud to bring to Thanksgiving, were about to walk into my office. James knocked again. "Miss Sterling? They're ready. Show them in." 3 men entered. I recognized the lead partner, Richard Morrison, from industry conferences. Late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit. Behind him, 2 younger partners. One I knew as Derek's direct supervisor, Marcus Chin, and another I didn't recognize. "Miss Sterling," Richard extended his hand. "Thank you for making time. I've been wanting to meet for months. The pleasure is mine. Please sit." We settled around my conference table. Through the window behind me, my company name was etched in glass. Sterling Healthcare Ventures. Below it, a smaller line. Rachel Sterling, founder and managing partner. "I'll be direct," Richard began. "Morrison and Partners is looking to expand significantly in healthcare technology. We just closed a $240 million fund, and we're searching for co-investment opportunities with firms that have real expertise in this sector." Marcus nodded. "Your track record is exceptional. The way you turned cardiotech around, brilliant. And the HealthBridge acquisition was perfectly executed." "Thank you. We're hoping to discuss potential partnerships," Richard continued. "Perhaps co-investment opportunities, deal flow sharing. We have capital and generalist investment expertise. You have specialized healthcare knowledge and a proven track record. It's a natural fit." I nodded, listening as they outlined their strategy. They wanted access to my deal pipeline. They wanted to learn my methods for evaluating healthcare technology companies. They wanted to attach their fund's reputation to mine. "Your fund is impressive," I said. $240 million is significant." Richard smiled. "We're quite proud of it. Took 3 years to raise. The team worked incredibly hard." He gestured to Marcus. "Marcus here was instrumental. And we have a young associate, Derek Sterling, who's been..." He stopped mid-sentence. Marcus had gone completely still, staring at my nameplate on the desk. "Sterling," Marcus said slowly. "Derek Sterling. Is he?" "My brother," I confirmed. The temperature in the room shifted. Richard's smile became strained. "I didn't realize you were related. Most people don't. We don't exactly work in the same circles." I kept my voice neutral. "Derek's never mentioned having a sister in private equity?" "No," Marcus said carefully. "He's mentioned a sister, but he said she works in the nonprofit sector." "I started there," I said. 12 years ago. But I transitioned to investment 8 years ago." Richard was looking at me differently now, reassessing. "Derek talks about his family sometimes. He's mentioned that his parents are very proud of his career. He said he's the only one in his family who went into finance." "That's technically true," I said. "He's the only one at a venture capital firm. I run my own private equity fund." The third partner, who'd been silent until now, suddenly leaned forward. "Wait, I know you. The Wall Street Journal did that profile piece. The silent giant of healthcare investment. That was you." He pulled out his phone, typed rapidly, then turned the screen toward Richard and Marcus. I could see the article headline in my photo. Richard went pale. "The article mentioned you'd built a $2.7 billion portfolio," the younger partner continued, reading from his phone. "It called you one of the most influential healthcare investors in the country. It said established firms regularly seek your guidance." Marcus was doing his own search now. "Jesus. Forbes profiled you last year. Power players reshaping healthcare investment. You were number 4 on the list." "Number 3, I corrected gently. They updated it." Richard's hand was trembling slightly. "Derek never mentioned any of this." "Derek doesn't know," I said simply. "My family doesn't know." "How is that possible?" Marcus looked genuinely confused. "I never told them. They assumed I was still doing nonprofit work and I never corrected them. They weren't interested enough to ask questions." Richard was scrolling through something on his phone now, his face growing redder. We're having Thanksgiving dinner at his parents' house. Derek invited the partners. He said it would be a great opportunity to meet his family, see where he comes from. He positioned it as. He stopped. As what? I asked. As a way to show his family background. Successful parents, strong family values. He implied his success ran in the family. I smiled thinly. And what did he say about me? Marcus and Richard exchanged glances. Marcus spoke carefully. He said you were in the nonprofit sector. That you'd never really found your career footing. That you were the family member who chose purpose over profit. And that while they loved you, you'd never understood business the way he did. The room was silent. He told us, Richard added quietly, that his parents were disappointed you never achieved what they'd hoped for. I nodded slowly. And based on that understanding, you all planned to attend Thanksgiving at my parents' house, where Derek would showcase his success and his impressive venture capital partners. Did he mention I wouldn't be attending? He said you had work obligations, Marcus said. Some nonprofit fundraiser you couldn't miss. No, I said. My mother uninvited me. She called this morning to tell me Thanksgiving was for successful people, and that Derek's venture capital partners were attending. She said it would be best if I skipped this year because I work in that little nonprofit sector, and you all operate at a different level. The silence stretched out. Richard looked like he might be sick. We need to be clear about something, I said, leaning forward. I'm not telling you this to embarrass anyone or to create problems. But you came here seeking a partnership with my fund. You wanted access to my expertise, my deal flow, my track record. Before we discuss that, you need to understand the full picture. Miss Sterling, Richard began, I don't know what to. Let me finish. Derek is your employee. This is awkward for you and I understand that. But here's what I need you to understand. I've built my career in silence while my family dismissed it. I've closed billion-dollar deals while they thought I was organizing charity fundraisers. I've sat on corporate boards while they pitted my career choices. And I've done all of this without their support, their connections, or their approval. I stood walking to the window. Derek has spent years positioning himself as the family success story. He's leveraged my parents' pride in him. He's used their dismissal of me to elevate his own image. And now he's brought that narrative into his professional life, using his successful family background as part of his personal brand. Marcus spoke quietly. We had no idea. Of course not. Because Derek is good at his job, and part of being good at his job is crafting a compelling narrative. I turned back to them. But here's what concerns me from a partnership perspective. Derek is operating from incomplete information. He's made assumptions about an entire sector, nonprofit and healthcare, based on his dismissal of my career. If he's that blind to the reality of his own sister's success, what other blind spots does he have? Richard stood. Miss Sterling, I need to be direct. This is a significant problem. Derek's judgment is compromised by his ego, I finished. Yes. We're attending Thanksgiving dinner at your parents' home in 2 days, Marcus said. Derek has built this up as a major occasion. Your parents are expecting us. They've planned an entire evening around showcasing Derek's success. And now we know that the daughter they've dismissed and uninvited is actually the most successful member of the family, the younger partner finished. At least in terms of our industry. Richard sank back into his chair. This is a disaster. It doesn't have to be, I said calmly. You have several options. You can attend the dinner as planned and say nothing, maintain Derek's narrative. You can attend and politely mention that you met with me. Or you can decline the invitation entirely. What would you do? Marcus asked. If you were in our position? I considered this. I'd think carefully about what this situation reveals about Derek's character and judgment. I'd consider whether someone who could so thoroughly misunderstand and undervalue his own sister's career for years might have similar blind spots in his professional analysis. And I'd ask myself whether those blind spots pose a risk to my fund. Richard nodded slowly. You're suggesting we need to reevaluate Derek's position at the firm. I'm suggesting you have new information about an employee's judgment and integrity. What you do with that information is your decision. The timing, Marcus said. 2 days before Thanksgiving. At his parents' house. With you uninvited because your mother thinks we're too successful to associate with you." He shook his head. "The irony is brutal. The truth often is." Richard stood again, this time with obvious decision in his posture. "Miss Sterling, I need to make a phone call. Would you excuse us for a moment?" "Of course. James can show you to the conference room down the hall." After they left, I sat at my desk, processing what had just happened. I hadn't planned this. I'd simply agreed to a meeting request from a venture capital firm seeking partnerships. The fact that it was Derek's firm, that these were the investors my mother thought were too important to meet me, that this meeting happened the same morning as her uninvitation, that was just timing. Or perhaps it was inevitable. Derek had spent so many years underestimating me that eventually his professional world and his family delusions had to collide. 20 minutes later, James knocked. "They'd like to speak with you again." The three men returned, and I could see they'd reached a decision. Richard spoke first. "We've had a difficult conversation and we need to be transparent with you. First, regarding the partnership opportunity we came here to discuss. We absolutely want to pursue that. Your fund's expertise and track record are exactly what we need. We'd be honored to explore co-investment opportunities. Second," Marcus continued, "we need to address the Derek situation. We've decided to attend Thanksgiving dinner as planned." My eyebrows rose. "But," Richard added quickly, "we're going to be honest with your family. Not cruel, not vindictive, but honest. If your career comes up, when it comes up, we're going to acknowledge that we met with you today, that we're pursuing a partnership with your fund, and that you're one of the most respected healthcare investors in the industry." "Derek will be humiliated," I said quietly. "Derek has apparently been humiliating you for years," Marcus replied. "And more importantly, he's been lying to us, by omission if not directly, about his family situation. That's a character issue we can't ignore." The younger partner spoke. "Miss Sterling, may I ask you something? Why did you never correct them? Your family, I mean. Why let them believe the wrong thing for so long?" I thought about this carefully. Because I wanted to see who they'd be when they thought I had nothing. I wanted to see if their love was conditional on success. And I wanted to build something that was entirely mine, not connected to my family name, not dependent on their support or approval. "And now?" Richard asked. "Now I know the answer. Their love is conditional. Their respect is transactional. And my success is entirely my own." I paused. "That last part, that's worth more than all of it." Marcus nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I think you've handled this with remarkable grace. Many people in your position would have exposed Derek years ago. Exposing him wouldn't have changed anything except prove I was petty. Building something bigger than his ability to diminish, that changed everything." We spent the next hour discussing actual partnership possibilities. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was planning co-investments with the same people who would be at my parents' house for Thanksgiving, celebrating the son who'd worked so hard to keep me uninvited. As they prepared to leave, Richard paused at the door. "Miss Sterling, I feel I should mention, Derek submitted a deal proposal last week for a healthcare tech investment. Given what we've learned today about his blind spots in this sector, we'll be reviewing it much more carefully." "That's wise," I said. "Due diligence matters." After they left, I stood at my window for a long time watching the city move below. My phone buzzed, a text from Derek. "Mom said you can't make Thanksgiving. Probably for the best. These investors are high level. You wouldn't have much to contribute to the conversation anyway. No offense." I stared at the message, then typed a simple response. "None taken. Enjoy your dinner." That evening, I called my best friend Sarah, who'd witnessed years of my family's dismissal. I told her about the meeting, about Morrison and Partners, about what was likely to happen at Thanksgiving. "Oh my God," she breathed. "This is like watching a Greek tragedy unfold. Derek has no idea what's coming." "He still doesn't have to know," I said. "If his colleagues stay quiet." "Rachel, they won't stay quiet. They can't. They're venture capitalists. They're supposed to identify value and potential. You think they can sit at your parents' table while Derek and your mother talk about his impressive career and your disappointing one? They'd be complicit in the lie." He was right. "What are you going to do Thursday?" she asked. "What I always do. Work. I have a board meeting Friday morning to prepare for." "You're not even slightly curious about how it plays out?" "Of course I am. But being curious doesn't mean I need to be there. Whatever happens, happens. But Sarah knew me better than that. You've spent 12 years building toward this moment. The moment when they realize who you actually are. And you're going to miss it. I didn't build my career for this moment, I corrected. I built it despite their inability to see it. That's very zen of you. Also, I don't believe you. I smiled despite myself. Fine. I'm curious. But I'm not going to crash their Thanksgiving to prove a point. You wouldn't be crashing. It's your family. It's a family that uninvited me, Sarah. Fair point. She paused. But promise me you'll keep your phone charged. Because I guarantee you're getting calls on Thursday. He was right about that too. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and clear. I went for a run along the lake, came home to my empty brownstone and made coffee. My phone was suspiciously quiet. Usually Mom would have texted by now with some comment about the dinner preparations. Derek would have sent something about his morning routine or his workout. Some subtle flex disguised as casual sharing. Nothing. At 11 my phone finally rang. That. Rachel. His voice was strange. Can you come to the house? Dad, Mom uninvited me. She was pretty clear. That was a mistake. We need you here. Please. What's wrong? Please come. As soon as you can. I'd never heard my father sound like that. Small, almost frightened. Against my better judgment I got dressed, got in my car and drove to their house in Evanston. The scene I walked into was surreal. My parents' elegant dining room, usually a showcase of entertaining perfection, felt like the aftermath of something broken. Mom sat at the table, mascara slightly smudged. Dad stood by the window. Derek sat alone on the couch in the adjacent living room, staring at nothing. And at the table, looking distinctly uncomfortable, were Richard Morrison and Marcus Chen. Everyone turned when I entered. Rachel, Mom started and her voice cracked. We didn't know. Richard stood. Miss Sterling. Thank you for coming. I apologize for the awkward circumstances. What happened? I looked around the room. Marcus spoke quietly. We arrived for dinner. Your mother was introducing us to family friends, talking about Derek's success. Someone asked about Derek's sister. Your mother said you worked in charity and couldn't attend because of work obligations. Derek added some comments about how you'd never understood business. And I prompted. And I mentioned that we just met with you Tuesday. That we'd spent 2 hours in your office discussing a partnership between Morrison and Partners and Sterling Healthcare Ventures. The silence that followed must have been spectacular. Your mother, Richard continued, didn't understand at first. He thought there was some mistake. Derek said I must have met with someone else named Rachel Sterling. So I showed them the Wall Street Journal profile. The Forbes article. Your fund's website. Mom was crying now quietly. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Derek hadn't moved from the couch, hadn't looked at me. Your mother asked why you'd never told them. Marcus said. Derek asked if I was sure we had the right person. Your father just kept saying, I don't understand. I stood in the doorway waiting. Mom finally spoke. Rachel, sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? All these years we thought. You thought I was a failure, I finished. You thought I was the disappointing daughter who chose charity work over real success. You thought Derek was the only one who understood business. We didn't, Dad started. Yes, you did. You said it constantly. Every family gathering, every holiday, every phone call. Derek drives a Tesla. Derek manages millions. Derek is taking us to this restaurant, that event. And Rachel, poor Rachel, is still doing her charity phase. Still taking the train. Still single because no successful man wants someone so unmotivated. Mom flinched. I'd quoted her words exactly from last Easter. Why didn't you correct us? Dad asked. Just tell us the truth? Because you never asked, I said simply. In 12 years, not once did any of you ask me a real question about my work. You asked if I was still doing the healthcare thing, or if I'd thought about getting a real job. You never asked what company I worked for, what role I held, what I actually did all day. You assumed, and that assumption was enough. Derek finally looked up. His face was gray. You let me look like an idiot. No, Derek. You did that yourself. I just didn't stop you. I told them, he gestured at Richard and Marcus. I told my colleagues that my family understood success. That we valued achievement. I brought them here to show them. To show them what? That you came from a family so focused on appearances that they could dismiss one child's actual success while celebrating another child's smaller achievements? That you come from a family that values perception over reality. Richard cleared his throat. Perhaps we should go. No, I said. Stay. You should see how this ends. I turned to my parents. Mom, when did you call to uninvite me from Thanksgiving? Tuesday morning, she whispered. But Rachel. And what did you say exactly? She couldn't speak. Dad answered. She said Thanksgiving was for successful people. That Derek's venture capital partners were coming and you wouldn't fit in. And you agreed with this decision? Dad looked down. We thought it was best. I turned to Derek. And what did you text me Tuesday afternoon? He said nothing. I pulled out my phone, read aloud. Mom said you can't make Thanksgiving. Probably for the best. These investors are high level. You wouldn't have much to contribute to the conversation anyway. No offense. Marcus actually winced. So let me be clear, I continued. On the same day that these investors came to my office seeking partnerships, that they sat in my conference room asking for access to my expertise and deal flow, that they acknowledged my fund's superior track record. On that exact day, my mother uninvited me from Thanksgiving because I wasn't successful enough to meet them. We didn't know, Mom said desperately. How could we know? You could have asked. Any time in the last 8 years, you could have asked one real question about my career. You could have Googled my name. You could have noticed when I stopped working for the nonprofit. You could have wondered how I afforded my house, my car, my life. But you didn't because you weren't interested. You'd already written my story, and it was easier to believe that story than to discover the truth. I looked at Derek. And you actively maintained this fiction. You told people I was in charity work. You deflected questions about my career. You used my parents' dismissal to elevate your own success. Why? He met my eyes finally. Because you made it so easy. You never posted about your wins. Never brought it up at family dinners. Never corrected anyone. It was like you wanted to be underestimated. I did want that, I said. Being underestimated is a competitive advantage. While you were busy proving yourself, I was busy building. While you networked at the right parties, I closed deals. While you crafted your personal brand, I created actual value. And now, he asked bitterly. What, you get to humiliate me in front of my colleagues? In front of our parents? This is your big revenge moment. Derek, if I wanted revenge, I would have had it years ago. I could have shown up at any family event and casually mentioned my fund. I could have posted my Forbes profile on social media. I could have made sure everyone knew. But I didn't because that's not why I built my career. Then why did you? Mom asked, genuinely confused. Why build all of this in secret? Because I wanted to know who you all were when you thought I had nothing. I wanted to see if your love was conditional. And I wanted to build something that was entirely mine, not connected to this family, not dependent on your approval. And now you know, Dad said quietly. You know we failed you. Yes, I agreed. You did. But I didn't fail myself. And that's what matters. Richard stood again. Miss Sterling, Rachel, I think we should leave you to discuss this as a family. We've intruded enough. Actually, I said, I'd like you to stay for one more minute. Because I want my family to understand something. I turned to Derek. Morrison and Partners came to me seeking a partnership. They want access to my expertise in healthcare technology investment. They want to learn from my methods. They want to attach their fund's reputation to mine. That's worth millions to them in deal flow and returns. Derek's face went even paler. Richard and Marcus will make their own decisions about how this affects your position at their firm. But I want you to understand something. The sister you've dismissed for years, the career you've belittled, the success you've denied, that's the success your own firm is now seeking access to. I looked at my parents. And Mom, Dad, the daughter you uninvited from Thanksgiving because she wasn't successful enough to meet Derek's investors? She's the investor those investors came to meet. The room was absolutely silent. Finally, Marcus spoke. Miss Sterling will be in touch about the partnership discussions. And Derek, we need to speak with you privately before the end of the week. They left quickly. The door closed behind them, leaving just my family. Mom was crying openly now. Rachel, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Dad's voice was hoarse. How do we fix this? I looked at them. These people who'd raised me, supported Derek, dismissed me, uninvited me, and now wanted to fix it all with an apology. You can't fix it, I said quietly. Not today. Maybe not ever. But you can start by understanding that my success isn't about you. It never was. I didn't build my career to prove anything to this family. I built it because I'm good at what I do. Because I saw opportunities others missed. Because I worked harder than anyone else was willing to work. We're so proud, Mom started. Don't, I cut her off. Don't tell me you're proud now. That's the problem. Your pride is conditional. Your respect is transactional. For 12 years I wasn't worth your pride because you thought I wasn't successful. Now you know I am and suddenly you're proud? That's not pride. That's relief that I didn't embarrass you. Derek stood suddenly. So what, you're just done with us? You're too successful now for your own family? No, Derek. I'm simply done pretending that your dismissal didn't hurt. I'm done making myself smaller to make you feel bigger. I'm done with a family dynamic where love and respect are contingent on perceived success. Then what do you want? Dad asked. Tell us what you want. I thought about this carefully. I want you to understand that the daughter you dismissed became successful because of who she is, not in spite of your lack of support. I want Derek to understand that real success isn't about the image you project. It's about the value you create. And I want all of you to sit with the reality that when you had a choice, you chose Derek's comfort over my presence. That's not, Mom started. Yes, it is. You uninvited your own daughter from Thanksgiving because you thought she'd embarrass your successful son. That was your choice. The consequences of that choice are yours to carry. I picked up my bag. I have work to do. You have a lot to think about. Rachel, please, Mom stood. Stay for dinner. We can talk about this. Mom, there's no turkey. There's no dinner. There are no investors to impress. There's just a family that chose wrong and a daughter who spent 12 years building something they never bothered to see. I walked to the door then paused. For what it's worth, I don't hate any of you. But I don't need you either. I built my success without your support. I'll continue without your approval. Derek's voice stopped me. The partnership. With Morrison and Partners. Are you going to do it? I haven't decided, I said honestly. I'll evaluate it like I evaluate every opportunity. On its merits, its strategic value, and its potential returns. Your involvement is irrelevant to my decision. They're going to fire me, he said flatly. After today, after this humiliation, they're going to fire me. Maybe, I said. Or maybe they'll see this as a learning opportunity. Either way, that's between you and them. I'm not your problem, Derek. Your judgment is your problem. Your ego is your problem. Your inability to see reality when it doesn't match your preferred narrative, that's your problem. I left them there. My crying mother, my devastated father, my humiliated brother. In their beautiful house with their shattered expectations. The drive back to the city felt longer than usual. My phone started ringing before I'd even reached the highway. Sarah, my friends, even my executive assistant James, who'd somehow heard already. I let them all go to voicemail. When I got home, I made myself a proper meal. Salmon, roasted vegetables, a good wine. I ate alone at my dining table looking out at the Chicago skyline. My phone buzzed constantly with messages, but I ignored them all. Finally, around 8 p.m. I opened my laptop and returned to work. There was a board meeting tomorrow, a merger proposal to finalize, 3 companies in my portfolio that needed attention. My family's drama was just noise. My work, my real work, continued. 1 week later Marcus Chen called. Miss Sterling, I wanted to update you on several things. First, we're moving forward with the partnership proposal. Our legal team is drafting terms. We think this could be very beneficial for both funds. I'm pleased to hear that. Second, regarding Derek. We've had extensive discussions with him about judgment, integrity, and the importance of accurate self-assessment. He's being placed on a performance improvement plan. His deal-making authority is being restricted. Whether he stays with the firm long-term will depend on his ability to demonstrate improved judgment. That seems fair. He asked me to tell you something, Marcus continued. He said to tell you he finally understands that success isn't about the story you tell. It's about the value you create. He said he spent years telling a story while you spent years creating value. That's progress, I said. Your parents also reached out. They'd like to meet with me and Richard. They want to understand your career better, learn about the industry. They seem genuinely eager to understand what they missed. That's their choice. Is it too late? Marcus asked gently. For your family, I mean. Is it too late to rebuild that relationship? I thought about this carefully. I don't know. Right now I need space. I need to see if they can respect me when I'm not performing success for them. I need to see if they can love me when I'm not exceeding expectations. And honestly, I'm not sure they know how. That's wise, Marcus said. And Rachel, if I may, you've handled this entire situation with remarkable grace. Many people would have been vindictive. You've simply been honest. Honesty is enough, I said. The truth did all the work. 6 months after that Thanksgiving, my life had found a new equilibrium. The partnership with Morrison and Partners was thriving. We'd co-invested in 3 healthcare technology companies, all performing ahead of projections. Derek had left the firm, not fired, but resigned to join a smaller fund where he'd have more room to grow without the weight of expectations. My parents and I spoke occasionally. Careful conversations, more honest than before but still finding their footing. Mom had apologized 17 times in 17 different ways. Dad had finally asked me real questions about my work. They were trying. Derek and I met for coffee once. It was awkward but honest. I'm sorry, he'd said. 4 years of being a self-absorbed asshole. For using your dismissal to prop myself up. For never once asking you a real question about your life. I accept your apology, I'd said. But Derek, you need to understand I don't need your validation anymore. I never did. That was always your need, not mine. I know that now. As I sat in my office that spring afternoon, reviewing the latest quarterly reports, I thought about that strange Thanksgiving 6 months ago. The collision of Derek's narrative and my reality. The moment when everything they thought they knew proved false. People asked if I was glad it happened. If I'd enjoyed the reversal, the vindication. The truth was more complicated. I wasn't glad my family had dismissed me. I wasn't glad they'd valued image over substance. I wasn't glad for the years of small cuts and casual cruelties. But I was glad I'd built something that was entirely mine. I was glad I'd never compromised my vision to match their expectations. I was glad I'd turned their dismissal into discipline, their doubt into determination. Most of all, I was glad I'd proven, to myself not to them, that success doesn't require validation. That building real value matters more than performing success. That being underestimated is only a weakness if you believe it. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard Morrison. Deal closed. $340 million acquisition. Your instincts were perfect. This partnership is the best decision we've made in years. I smiled and returned to work. They'd come to my office seeking a partnership. They'd left understanding that the woman they'd dismissed wasn't just worthy of partnership. She was the standard they were trying to reach. And somewhere in Evanston, my family was learning the same lesson. That the daughter they'd underestimated had never needed their approval to succeed. She just needed them to get out of her way.